final session of the day. We are happy to have Dan Starishevsky here to present. Dan was born and raised in New York, lived in Boston before a job opportunity brought him here to Colorado, where he's lived since 2004. And I will go ahead and turn it over to Dan.
Well, thank you, Michael, and hello, everybody. As Michael mentioned, my name is Dan Starishevsky. I will tell you that name is a doozy. In fact, I've gotten some favorite mispronunciations I'll share with you. Again, it's Starishevsky. I've been called Dan Strabalingus, Dan Jabotinsky, Dan Stradivarius, which I assumed was a compliment since that's a expensive musical instrument. And because it's Saturday, in about 5 hours, I'll be Dan Shot of Whiskey. So if I ever meet you and we ever happen to be in the same room, feel free to butcher my name because plenty of people have done it before you. So as Michael mentioned, I'm a native New Yorker, but I don't like the Yankees. In fact, after I graduated school in New York, I moved up to Boston and I became a Red Sox fan. I also met my lovely bride there, Bridget. She and I got married in Newport, Rhode Island, and we moved 16 years ago to Colorado, which is where we currently live. We're raising 3 kids. They are 12, 14, and 16, boy, girl, boy. So I like to say a rose between 2 thorns. I am a financial services geek, so I call myself. I've been in financial services all of my life, and I'm a national speaker for my current employer. I am very proud to be part of the board of the Parkinson Association of the Rockies, currently the board president. But the reason I'm here today is I have Parkinson's, and I was diagnosed about 6 years ago. Now, that first year, if you remember your diagnosis, is a crazy year. In fact, my head was spinning. My apologies for a little profanity, but I call it the what the F year. And what dawned on me after about a year of after my diagnosis is I was actually my own worst enemy. And what I mean by that was I was saying a ton of nasty things to myself. And mom and dad always told us, if you keep saying that, you're going to believe it. Well, guess what? They're right. They've always been right because I started believing all the nasty things I was saying to myself. And I refer to all that nasty internal dialogue as my self-speak. And so what I want to do today is take you on a journey through my diagnosis. And I want to help you understand how my self-speak, my negative self-speak, affected my life. Now, there's one other thing I want to share. I thought originally that the beginning of my diagnosis or any difficult phase of life is more of a psychological journey or hurdle than it is a physical one. I'm 7 years into this diagnosis, and it is still more of an emotional roller coaster ride than it is physical. And that may change. It probably will change. But the psychology of what we go through, the mental gyrations, our self-speak is omnipresent, and we have to pay attention to it. And what I want to spend time today talking to you about is how critically important it is for you to monitor what you say to yourself. And if you were like me, and you were sending yourself negative messages, nasty grams as I call them, it's time to take control. So let's go back about 7 years when it all began. I was actually in a coworker's office, and I was tapping my fingers on her desk. Now, what happened at that point was I could only tap my left hand, and my right hand stayed stagnant. I can do it now because I'm medicated, but I wasn't then. And it dawned on me at that time, like, I think I've also been having slight tremors in my right hand, to which my coworker said, that's not good. And I agreed. So I made an appointment with my primary care physician, and she did what a primary care physician does. She checked my arms. She asked me if I got into an accident. She checked for bumps, bruises, abrasions. She couldn't see anything. And she said, probably nothing, but just in case, let's give you a referral to a neurologist. Yellow flag. So fast forward a couple of weeks, I go to the neurologist's office, and he did the same thing. Checked my arm, asked me if I had been in an accident, checked for bumps, bruises, and abrasions. But he did something different. He asked me to make the following motion: screw in a light bulb, tap my fingers, tap my feet, walk up and down the aisle. I'm sure you guys have been through all of this. And he said, well, it could be nothing, or it could be stress or coffee. Are you stressed out? Do you drink coffee? Heck yes. In fact, coffee's a legal drug. I recommend it highly. I'm selling it out of my backyard if you want any. And I'm stressed. This is my mid 40s. I'm raising a family. I have a hard job. Life is crazy. He said, if it's not those things, it could be something called benign essential tremor. And I'd never heard of that, but I said, what the heck? It's benign. How bad could that be? Or he said it could be Parkinson's. And I said, don't flip out, which I flipped out a little bit. He said, don't flip out. Just make an appointment with the receptionist on the way out. I'll see you in 3 months, and we will keep an eye on this. So I did what every good doobie would do in that situation. I went directly home, and I got on the World Wide Web. And I searched for 2 things in particular. One, what is Parkinson's? Because I had no idea. I knew Michael J. Fox had it. I knew Muhammad Ali had it. That was all. The second thing I searched for was I in the right hands? And I figured a neurologist was the right hands, but I wanted to check. And it turned out that if I had Parkinson's disease, I needed to see a movement disorder specialist. So I broke up with my neurologist, and I immediately made an appointment with my movement disorder specialist. He did the same thing, checked my arm, no bumps, bruises, or abrasions, had me screw in the light bulb, tap my fingers, tap my feet, walk up and down the aisle. Same thing, could be nothing, could be stress, coffee, benign essential tremor, Parkinson's. Make an appointment, we'll see you in 6 months. So I'll fast forward a year, and it's April 23rd, 2014. And I had my movement disorder specialist visit, and he turned to me after our chat together and he said, we are 95% sure you have Parkinson's. To which I said, awesome. That means I've got a 5% chance that I don't have Parkinson's. And he said, no, you've got Parkinson's. Now, we've all seen a lot of movies. There were no birds chirping over my head. The room didn't spin. But I was sitting next to my wife in the doctor's office, and we squeezed each other's hands. I don't remember a lot of what was said to me at that point. I got a couple of prescriptions for medication. But he said, make an appointment on the way out, and we will get to know each other. We'll see each other every 6 months going forward. So made the appointment for 6 months. My wife and I get in the elevator and go down to the lobby of the basement. Now, let me pause for a moment. Elevators are horribly awkward places. You don't know where to look. You don't know what to say to people. Imagine going down 10 flights when you just found out you had a disease. I don't know if anybody had that experience, but that's the single most awkward elevator ride. But we got into the lobby. We found a small cafe, and we hid in a little corner, and we hugged. And we both cried. And for the first time in my married life, I cried in front of my wife, and which is cool. But after what seemed like an eternal hug, Bridget, my wife, kind of let go, and she looked at me in the eyes and she said, and I'll never forget this, we got this. I will be with you all the way. Now, I don't know how she knew exactly what to say, but she knew exactly what to say. Because what I've come to understand is Parkinson's, or any diagnosis of a disease, is a lonely business. And I needed assurances that I was not on this leaky raft all alone. So the other thing I realized, but I only realized this about a year later, was that that diagnosis was going to unleash a tidal wave of negative self-speak that would alter my view of my self-worth. Let me say that again. That diagnosis released a tidal wave of negative self-speak that literally changed my view of who I was, my value to society, my contribution to my family. That was unbelievable. So let's just talk about what self-speak is. Not surprising, it is what it sounds like. It's the things we say to ourselves. And it turns out we have busy little brains. We're saying a lot of things to ourselves all day, every day, even when we're sleeping, our brains are going. So I've got a little quiz for you. Try to answer this question to yourself. How many thoughts do you think the average human has every single day? What do you think of that? Turns out it's between 60 and 80,000 thoughts a day. I'm going to just use 60 to be conservative. 60,000 thoughts every single day. And it turns out we don't say the nicest things to ourselves in our thoughts. On average, so that means if you remember your math days, half of us are lower, half of us are higher, but on average, 80% of our thoughts are negative. 80%. Now that's the average. I was just diagnosed with the disease, so I was clearly above average. The second thing I learned was that 95% of our thoughts are repetitive. So we're saying a lot of nasty stuff to ourselves and we're repeating it. So it's like a hamster on a wheel. It's just turning and turning the same nasty thoughts we are sending ourselves all day, every day. And I am convinced that the 99% of the nasty things you hear about yourself comes from you. Isn't that absurd? You're the meanest person you know, but you can fix that. And here's what my negative self-speak was. This is what I was saying to myself every day, all day after my diagnosis for a year. I won't be a good dad. I won't be able to ski, drive, or exercise. My wife will be my caretaker. I'm not prepared financially. I'll lose my friends. I'm going to drool all over myself. I'll embarrass my kids. Over and over and over. Now, most of you don't know me, but I'm sure if you have kids, you're like me. You love them to pieces. I love my kids to pieces. And look what's on the screen. I won't be a good dad. I'll embarrass my kids. That was heartbreaking. I even had a vision that I would revisit over and over again. I was in the auditorium for my oldest kid's high school graduation in a wheelchair, and I'm shaking uncontrollably. And he won't look at me because he's embarrassed about me. Now, let me pause for a second. Maybe all that nonsense is true, but it isn't true now. It's true in the future. I was looking 20 years into the future. My son is now 16. He's going to graduate in 2 years rather. I'm not going to be in a wheelchair. And eventually it dawned on me about a year into that first what the F year, that all that nastiness, all that internal dialogue, all that negative self-speak had taken its toll. And it took its toll in 3 ways. The first was it dawned on me I wasn't a very happy or positive person anymore. And I've always been happy and positive. I'm that kid in the family that was happy-go-lucky. You can put me in the middle of between the other 2 kids, they can fight, I'll break it up. I was the guy that was flexible, happy, and just I rolled with the punches. But in that year, I convinced myself otherwise. The next thing I realized was I actually changed my view of my self-worth. And what dawned on me was that, number one, I was worried that I wasn't going to be a good husband and I wasn't going to be a good dad. So, that took away some of the things that were so critical to my my personal views of value and meaning in life. And then finally, it dawned on me that all that negativity, all that broadcasting and traveling into the future to see what could be, was robbing myself of today. I want to be a great dad, and yet I was 20 years in the future. I wasn't with my kids. I was there physically, but I wasn't there emotionally or mentally. And it had to stop. I had to put a stop to it. I love this quote I saw. If you talk to your friends the same way we talk to ourselves, we wouldn't have any friends at all. I think that is so true. But one of the things I want to share with you today is there are those of us on this webinar right now that have Parkinson's. Many of us have had issues with self-speak like I did because of that diagnosis. But please don't think this is just for the folks on the webinar that have been diagnosed with Parkinson's. This affects all of us. We all have self-speak. On average, half of all of our thoughts, 80% of all of our thoughts are negative. On average, 95% of all of our thoughts are repetitive. This is all of our issues. This is a societal, a humanity issue. We say nasty things to ourselves. But why? Why? I wanted to know why we're so mean to ourselves. Well, it turns out that I had to go back to the reptilian brain, as we call it, where our ancestors kind of helped form our fight or flight response system. We all studied this in school at some point. But when faced with danger, you either run or you stand your ground. And the stressors for our ancestors were much different than the stressors today. Our ancestors were forced to stress about survival, hunting, fishing, freezing to death, attacked by wild animals like a lion. Those are real stressors. And the physical response to the fight or flight system, which I'm sure you must know, is our pupils dilate so that we can see better. Our heart rate and breathing increases so that we're ready for action. Our muscles tense so we're ready for fight, and our body perspires. And that is our way of cooling the engine, which is about to come close to overheating. But what does all that have to do with self-speak? Well, it turns out that today's stressors, which as I mentioned are much different, trigger the same exact fight or flight response system. Most of us hate public speaking. It's the number one phobia in America. Triggers the fight or flight response system. And most people want to flight or flee, I should say. But a fight with a friend, a fight with your spouse, a missed promotion, getting terminated from work, or in my case, a diagnosis of a disease. All of that triggers our fight or flight response systems. And our bodies don't know the difference between a lion attack and asking a girl for a phone number or a boy for a phone number. It triggers the same exact physical response system. But there's one more thing I want to share with you about our physiology that's pretty unique. We have something in our brain called the frontal lobe. And I won't get into a lot of detail about what the frontal lobe does because there are many things it does for us. But one of the things it allows us to do is it allows us to travel theoretically in time. We can think back or we can think forward in time. And that can be a blessing or a curse. It's a blessing if you're thinking back to some of those beautiful moments you experienced and you want to relive them. It's also a blessing if you're just thinking about the future and planning for it and getting excited about it. It's a curse if you are reliving bad memories of the past and you are punishing yourself for them. Or in my case, I was transporting myself into the future and punishing myself for what I thought was coming, which is unbelievable. And it, as I said, it robs us of our time in the here and now. So again, remember what my self-speak was. I won't be a good dad. I won't be able to ski, exercise, work, hike, and my family will end up being my caretaker. I'll lose my friends. I'll drool all over myself. I'm not prepared financially. My kids will embarrass me, over and over and over again. And so the scientists or the doctors, psychologists will tell you I was filtering, which is magnifying the negative aspects of the situation and filtering out the positive ones. And there were positive ones. Remember what I told you? My wife released me from that hug that I will never forget and said, we got this together. It turns out, I was married for 10 years at that point, but I never tested my relationship. In the beginning of a relationship, everything's happy, go lucky, you're having babies, life is good. This was the first real test. And my wife came through with flying colors and has to this day. The other silver lining here is I'm going to be a good role model for my parents, my kids. I want my kids to say, hey, dad figured out how to live with Parkinson's with grace and dignity. I think I'm going to be okay in life. I was also catastrophizing. I was expecting the very worst, and I was polarizing, saying it's either good or bad, and it's not. Parkinson's, any disease, any hardship in life has both good and bad, and that is true with my journey and my disease. And so if you're still asking yourself, what does this have to do? What does all of this frontal lobe and fight or flight, what does it have to do with self-speak? Well, here it is. In order to survive, our ancestors had to pay attention to negative experiences, because if they happened again, if they survived and they happened again, they had to be able to repeat that experience to survive again. And what we did over time is we created the reality that we can store negative experiences in long-term memory far easier and far faster than positive ones. And that's why negative people do so much damage, because we're actually hardwired to be a receiver of that. It's why that negative person who finally gets terminated at the office, only then do you figure out how much damage they've done. It's why the news leads with it. If it bleeds, it leads. We're hardwired for it, but we can change that. We can rewire our brains, and this is the key. We can rewire our brains for happiness, and it's simple. You just got to pay attention to it. You just got to be committed to it. But this is a simple journey. You can do it on your own. It doesn't take a doctor, no bills, no medicine. And I believe it's the best thing that happened to me since my diagnosis, maybe in my life, believe it or not, because I'm a happier, more fulfilled person today than I was before my diagnosis. So the question I asked myself was, how do I take control of all this nasty self-speak? How do I arrest this internal dialogue? Well, the first thing I asked myself was, could I be aware of it? Could I, 60 to 80,000 thoughts a day, how could I possibly be aware of all of that? Well, you can't. A lot of it's happening when you sleep. But sometimes you can. And we got to focus on the things we can control in life. And what I found out was I can be aware of my negative self-speak in the quiet moments of life, in the shower, when I'm driving the car. But I found out that the real moment for me was when I was exercising, because I'm always super excited. I'm happy. My endorphins are flowing. And I'm in tune with my thinking. And so my suggestion is find that moment for you. For me, it's on my bicycle. And I kind of eavesdrop on my internal dialogue, my self-speak. And that's when I plug in. So I could be aware. Not all the time, but I could be aware. The next question I asked myself was, could I interrupt that self-speak? And I don't know how I came up with this, but I decided every time I was being mean to myself, I was going to stop it. And I was going to say, I love my wife. I love my life. I love my wife. I love my family. And I said, I'm going to say that to myself 3 times inside voice, of course, because I don't want anybody to think I'm crazy. So I'd say, I love my life, I love my wife, I love my family. I love my life, I love my wife, I love my family. I love my life, I love my wife, I love my family. And guess what? Two things happened. I forgot why I was so nasty to myself. I didn't even remember after saying that 3 times what I was bitching to myself about. And the second thing that dawned on me was I was actually reminding myself of what's important. I'm grateful to be alive. I love the heck out of my wife. I love the heck out of my kids. That's what's important. And so I could be aware, I could stop and interrupt my thinking. I was like, all right, this is cool. I want more. And so what I decided was I'm going to take control over all the negative stimuli around me, all the stuff that comes in from life. No more sad movies. I don't need to watch death, hate, and destruction. I don't need blood splashing on the screen. I don't need limbs flying. I don't need crying, screaming, yelling. No more of those movies. My definition of a great movie is I feel better when I walk out of the movie theater than when I walked in. I'm an Avengers fan. You may not like the Avengers. Great. That's a seat that I can have closer to the screen. But find your movie, find your mojo. For me, if a good guy wins in the end, hallelujah. That's a great movie. No more news. I said it earlier. Their mantra is if it bleeds, it leads. No, thank you. I don't need blood. That's for somebody else. I know that does not make me the best citizen of the planet, but I need to protect myself and I need to protect my family. So no news. I got rid of negative people in my life, and I've got some people that are teetering on the fence of negativity, and I'm seriously questioning whether or not I keep them in the inner circle. Remember, we're hardwired for negativity. You don't need anybody filling that negative fuel can. Get rid of them. They are quite literally a ball and chain around your neck. I committed to exercise. I've always been into exercise, but I've doubled down. And by the way, if you haven't found cycling, check it out. I love mountain biking. I like road biking too, but I don't like playing in traffic. But cycling has been spectacular. And I understand it's quite good for people with Parkinson's. The other thing is diet. And I tell people all the time, you cannot out-exercise a bad diet. Eat right, not all the time. I love pizza. I love Oreo cookies. There isn't a better cookie on planet Earth, and I will eat them, but not all the time. Just don't have sodas. Avoid all the chips. And if you eat fast food, cut that stuff out. But take baby steps, get active, and eat right. I joined the Parkinson Association of the Rockies board. One of the best things I've done. Jody and Karen and Elena and Michael and the whole staff, amazing people. They've got 6 people, and they are an unbelievably productive group that is on a noble cause for all of us. And I'm currently the president. I'm humbled by that role. I try everything to make this a better organization than where we started when I joined the board. And I think we're doing great things. But selfishly, a lot of this is good for me too. It's good for the board. It's good for PAR, and it's good for me. That's good. And then I started practicing gratitude. So simple to replace those negative thoughts with positive thoughts. And let me share with you what I mean by that. I'm not going to spend a lot of time on gratitude because I think it's fairly well known. I just don't know how many people are actually doing it. I wasn't. And there's a saying that I agree for the most part that happiness is a decision. For most people, it's a decision. Not for everybody, but for most people, it is a decision. And it was a decision for me. And I decided I wanted to be happy. So I stopped focusing on all that negative stuff I was focused on. And I started focusing on some of the miracles around me. A sunny day. What's better? I get up at 6:30 because my dog licks my face. We go out for a walk. I'm kind of groggy, but my eyes open to the magnitude of Mother Nature. The blue sky, the birds chirping, everything is fresh and new in the morning. It's alive. I feel the warmth of the sun on my body. Nothing is better than a sunny day. A friend of mine asked me last night, what's your favorite season? And I said, hands down, I don't know. I love all the seasons because I love to ski. I love the fall, spring, but I might edge summer up there because I'm a beach guy. And those sunny days are spectacular. A flower, you know, we all have seen millions of flowers, maybe billions of flowers in our lives. We walk right by them and we don't pay attention to them. Flowers are beautiful. I take pictures of them with my cell phone. And then when I get home and I have some free time, I enlarge them. You'd be amazed at what is happening at kind of the micro level of a flower. It's beautiful. Babies. I'm a huge baby fan. I will ask you to hold your baby even if I've never met you. And everybody in the right mind says go pound sand, which I'm fine with because I'm a parent. I don't want strangers holding my baby, but I brought life into this world. I created 3 babies. Well, my wife did most of the heavy lifting. Don't tell her I said that. But it is spectacular. The human body, the brain that we can see and hear, that our planet Earth is close enough, but not too far from the sun to create life. We've got oxygen. Let me ask you this one. When you get in the water, I have a tendency to sink. I don't know about you, but an aircraft carrier that can float, how's that possible? That's spectacular. There's so much for us. I love coffee. Always travel with my coffee cup. Water is great. I love chapstick. I use chapstick all the time. There's so much to be grateful for. My friend has this great approach. He's written down the 100 things he's most grateful for. And what he does is before his feet hit the ground, he reads 5 of them every morning. He wants to start the day practicing gratitude. So if we put it all together, beware of your negative thoughts. See if you can just be conscious of when it's happening. My moment was in the quiet moment. Find your moment to be aware. And if you're having an issue with negative self-speak, interrupt it. Use my mantra if you want. I love my life, I love my wife, I love my family. Create your own. Do something totally different, but arrest that thinking. Eliminate the negative stimuli. The negative stuff isn't just in here. It's coming in from the outside. And if you're like me, you need a less porous barrier to stop that stuff from coming in. And practice gratitude. It's so simple. Be thankful for everything around you in life. So I'm here to tell you folks, my primary message is that what you say to yourself is more powerful than you know. And I'm convinced that we are either programming ourselves for hope or hopelessness. And no place does that better find itself than in the professional athlete, the elite athlete, who when they race, they win by hundredths of a second. And I want to take you back in time one more time, but this time I want to go back to the 1950s. It was an English runner by the name of Roger Bannister. And Roger was training like any other athlete for his races. At that time, the idea of running a mile in under 4 minutes was just absurd. In fact, anybody in the right mind knew that if you tried to break 4-minute mile, it was dangerous, and it wasn't just impossible. You could injure yourself seriously. Well, Roger Bannister trained, and he trained, and he trained, and he visualized, and he believed. And sure enough, in the mid-1950s, Roger Bannister broke the 4-minute mile, running it in 3 minutes, 59.4 seconds. And when he was asked how he did it, he said, it's the brain, not the heart or the lungs, that is the critical organ. He knew he could do it. So he did it. He believed in himself. And guess what? Shortly after Roger Bannister broke the 4-minute mile, somebody else did. And then somebody else did. And then more people did. You can go to a high school track meet today and find kids that run the mile under 4 minutes. Roger did it because he believed. Everybody else that followed did it because they knew it was possible. That's what the brain is capable of. And I will leave you with these words of wisdom by a Chinese philosopher by the name of Lao Tzu. He said, watch your thoughts, they become your words. Watch your words, they become actions. Watch your actions, they become habits. Watch your habits, they become character. And watch your character, for it becomes your destiny. Your thoughts lead to your destiny. That is how powerful your self-speak is. So I will stop there. I'm going to take myself out of presentation mode. I want to thank everybody for having me on the webinar today because I'm honored to be here. And let's see if we have any questions.
Yeah, Dan, thank you so much for that. That was a great presentation on how to keep practicing that positive self-speech. We've got a couple minutes really quick. If anybody wants to submit some questions in the Q&A tab or just type one up in the chat real quick, go ahead and do that right now. I know it lags a bit, so we'll just kind of stall for just a moment. But Dan, thanks again for closing out our virtual E3 conference here today. We were happy we still got to host one, just had to be a little bit virtual. And thank you everybody for participating. I think we got one. Dan, do you have any suggestions for caregivers to stop negative self-speak?
Yeah, that's a great question. And it's a great question because negative self-speak is not just an issue for people like me and like caregivers or the people that are taking care of those that have Parkinson's. This is negative self-speak plagues humanity. It plagues all of us. And as I said, we're hardwired for it because of, as I walk through kind of the way our brains formulated over hundreds, even thousands of years. And whether you're a caregiver or a person with Parkinson's or a doctor or a nurse, or you're just part of PAR, this is an issue for all of us. And so my recommendation is the same. Try to be aware of when you're being negative to yourself. For me, it's in the quiet moments. Find a way to stop that. Replace it with positive thinking. Get rid of all the negative stimuli in your life. Rinse and repeat, rinse and repeat, rinse and repeat. Stay at it. Your brain is a muscle. It's like working out. It takes months, but you will find yourself happier than you are right now. And incidentally, my mother is 89. She is suffering from a little bit of dementia. She's doing great. She's lived a long, wonderful life. She doesn't have Parkinson's, but she suffers from negative self-speak because she knows, she's self-aware, she can't remember a lot of things. And I tell her the same thing. Look at the wall, find the picture of the kids, find the picture of the grandkids, and tell yourself how fortunate you are. Replace all that negativity with positive.
Perfect. Perfect answer. We got time for a couple more here. Next one. Do you think doing different exercises as opposed to the same is better to continue help that positive self-talk?
Yeah, I didn't get into it today, but what you're triggering for me is the importance of novelty in life. I find that in exercise, in life, but particularly in exercise, we get into routines or ruts, and we find ourselves doing the same thing over and over and over again. And while that's okay, your body would actually benefit more from diversity of workout, and I think your brain would too. It's just more interesting. It turns out that we fire up our neurotransmitters, which fires up our brain, which gets all those good chemicals like codeine and dopamine, which we have a short supply of when we are doing novel things. So to answer your question, do all the exercises you can do. My kids ask me if I want to play lacrosse, basketball, football, baseball. I say yes to all of it. I'm in my basement lifting. I change what I lift. I have treadmills, change it all. Go for runs, walk with the dog. Just do something, but don't get it in a rut. I think it's a great question. Change up life. Novelty is good.
Perfect. And last one here, we'll kind of round it out. You said that your bike is your main place. What did you do to find that your bike was the best place for you? How did you discover that?
That's a great question. I was kind of in search of, so I found out that humans are negative. We have 80,000 thoughts. I knew 80% of them were negative, and I wanted to figure out how I could tap into that, how I could, as I said, eavesdrop on myself.
Yep.
It's hard to do that when you're in a meeting. It's hard to do that when you're busy. You've got to quiet yourself, and your brain won't quiet, it stays active, but you've got to quiet yourself. And that's when I was able to kind of tap in and eavesdrop on my inner dialogue. And because biking was the thing that always made me feel the happiest, it was easier to notice when I wasn't being nice to myself, because that just doesn't make sense. I love what I'm doing. Why would I say that? So not sure if that's your place, but that was mine.
Yeah, and you always got to make sure you find yours so that works for you the best. That's great. Awesome. Well, Dan, thank you again for closing us out on the virtual E3.